So the topic for today, I I ended up changing the title of the topic, which is why suffering, and we'll talk about it after I go to the beginning. So this whole topic started off with a coworker that had asked me about the coronavirus. So at first, I entitled this meeting, "Where is God in the coronavirus world?" Um, so I have a coworker, and he works with one of the hospitals, and we had worked together, and we don't work together very often, but I know him, and we when we work, we talk. Um, he's a really nice guy. I want to say that I think that he had said that at one point that he used to be in the faith, where he used to be in church. I don't remember if he said that he was raised in church or not, but he used to be in church at one point. Was a Christian, but then ended up leaving, and he hasn't been back in church in a while. Um, but when we were talking, when we have talked before, he has asked me about my faith, and I don't remember how it came up, but he did know that the type of church that I went to, and he was familiar with it, and the type of people that we are as apostolics, and he did know that I was going to Bible college. I think I had mentioned something along the lines of that way, and I had wanted him to watch my videos from before to see what he thought of it. And so he knew that that I was doing a lot of studying at that time, which I still am. And I remember when we were working, this happened maybe about a month or two ago, where I want to say about a month ago. And yeah, while we were working, he was like, "Hey, Andrew, can I ask you a serious question?" And he asked me a few questions, but his first question kind of like struck me. And I was like, "Man, like nobody's really asked me that." And he asked me, "Why do you think that we are going? Why do you think that?" Man, I'm trying to. I should have wrote it down how exactly he said. um, I remember he asked, through this whole like pandemic, why are we going through it? What is there a reason? And that's kind of, I remember that's what he kind of like more or less went around. He said, is there a reason why we are going through this pandemic? Is it because God wants to show us something, or is it because he's trying to punish us for something? That was his question. So I kind of wanted to, those of you, if you guys want to try to respond before I actually give what my response was to him, I'd like to hear what you guys uh, would have said. Kind of like off the spot. And I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot. If you don't want to talk, I mean, that's fine. If you want to write in the comments, that's fine. But I'd like to hear what you guys. When I remember this, when I came home, I asked my wife. I was like, "What would you have said?" Because I was like, I don't know if I said the right thing. I think I said the right thing, but now that I look back, it's like, man, I think that I could have said some things a little bit more differently, but I kind of like went, like off the cuff, like, first thing that popped in my head. But yeah, I guess that would be the question that we're going to be going over today. So where is God in the coronavirus world?
Okay. Well, uh, as to why, I would think the way that I saw it was, I feel like God was really just trying to reveal where our hearts were at,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be with our families in ministry, or just what our priorities were, where where we lied with our relationship with God. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it also just gave us an opportunity to really work on those things as well. Like, we probably think it was probably the opposite, like, oh, we stopped going to church or we stopped doing all these things, but I felt like it gave us an opportunity to be able to work on them.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it was a time to actually even get better at a lot of things. Like, whether it be perfecting your craft or your ministry, like praying, fasting, getting ready for when we were to go back. I don't know. I felt I felt like it was like really a growth season to learn where we were at spiritually and just to be able to grow off of that. That was what I got from this.
All right. I appreciate you answering it. And if you see me looking now, it's because I want to write what you guys say with some of this stuff too. But yeah, that's a good that would be a great answer. Does anybody else want to try?
I'll share.
Okay.
I think the first thing I would have said is no, it's not to punish. I personally believe God doesn't do things to punish because he died for us. So there's lessons to be learned, but it's not for punishment. It's to always show us something with love. That's my thought on that part of, because people have asked me, is God punishing us? God punishing him? I'm like, no. To me, God doesn't punish. Again, like I said, lessons learned. I also agree with Naomi about evaluation to see where we were at, but also I think it's the Lord, from what I've seen and read in the Bible, and he's so merciful and so kind and so patient and so long suffering with us, that this is just to give us a wake-up call, like, okay, I'm around the corner. For you guys it's around the corner, for me it's already here. Because you know how they say one day is like 1,000 years. So I'm just like, he wants us to come back, those of us who have strayed far away from the shepherd, to come back before it's too late, and he does come as judgment. And then that's when it changes. Then that's when it's no longer the merciful, because now he's coming as the judge, and that's when it's done for me. That's when it's done for me, and it's over. Because when he comes, that's it. You've either gotten in or you're not. Because he has to, for me, he has to draw the line somewhere.
Right.
Because that's what the Bible says. So that's where my point of view is. But the people that I've always said, it's love, and we need to know where we're at. And some of them believe in their own way in the Lord, not necessarily Bible based, apostolic or Trinitarian, like that, not necessarily that. They have their own beliefs, and I don't know if they still some don't. They would say, oh, I used to be a 7-day Adventist, or I used to be Jehovah's Witness, or I used to be, but and I'm like, well, it's all just, so I don't make it about religion. I just make it about God. I focus it on God. I don't, because they say, well, you used to be, or you seemed to be religious. And I go, well, to me, it's not religious. To me, it's my relationship with the Lord. Do I have a relationship with God?
Right.
And my faith of what I believe is based on the Bible, not another book, not another complementing book, just straight up, King James Version Bible. That's what I say. Because that way I don't run into the arguments that lead you down the other rabbit holes. Well, what about this? And what, I just base it on that, because again, I just have minutes to speak to them, because then, work comes in or something else comes in, or they just have a minute. So I want to make it as valuable as I can, because I don't know when the next time I talk to them. And then after that, I'm like, oh God, did I say the right thing? God help me. I hope I said the right thing.
Yeah.
God, I hope I wasn't like dumb and didn't, because I wasn't on the ball, not blaming God, but me, that because we always need to be prepared, and we always have to know when to say, because sometimes it's not the right time to say anything. It's just to be there and listen, and then it'll come around again when it is the right time to say something.
Right.
But one thing I found curious, and this is just a little sidebar note, is that a lot of people were really scared, like scared, because then it was like, you know, I'm scared, you know, praying and stuff they probably never thought about before. So I know fear was in a lot of people. Kind of was in me a little bit, because I was all like, okay, is this the mark? Is this the, you know, with the shot and stuff like that? My mind kind of went there too. And I was like, well, Lord, you know what? Help me. And you're really telling us to start, you know, getting our house together individually. And if you're married or whatever with kids, the same thing. Because, you know, we don't take anything with us when we pass. The only thing we could take is ourselves, and Lord willing, you know, our family members.
Right.
That's the only thing.
Right. Yep.
So
Yep.
that was my take on it.
All right. No, thank you for sharing. That yeah, that's a really great answer. I think between you two, I kind of said something, I guess, that included kind of like both things. But yeah, those are really great answers. If anybody else wants to share, I don't know if Tim wants to speak. I like to know what you would have said, but you don't have to talk if you don't want to. Or Amadis, I'm gonna wait. If either of you guys don't want to say anything, I can keep going on.
I'm good. I feel like Noemi and
Yeah.
can you hear me?
Yeah.
I feel like they pretty much said what I would have said, and I feel like what Melissa said was accurate, is that you don't want to say things to scare them because they're already scared. So you don't want to enhance that fear. So I think the whole point of that is to redirect their thoughts to something positive, not focus on like, well, this is God preparing the world because he's coming, you know, and if you don't, you're not ready, you're going to hell, you know, which is like to me, that's like that's like an apostolic mentality. Like that's where we go all the time. Like that's where my mom goes, like everyone I know that's a Vejita in the church, like that's where they go. So it's like, you don't want to do that, because then you're just terrifying them even more. They're already scared. This is like something that none of our generation has ever seen. So in order, like they're already terrified. So if they're asking questions, that means they've already been thinking about it. So you don't want to enhance that fear. So I do agree with that it's like that with what Melissa says, like keep it on the positive and just focus on God and not on whether, you know, oh, you're Mormon? No, you got to come to the faith. You know, you gotta get straight with God. It's like, no, you don't want to terrify people. You want to redirect them and just focus on what's the positive aspect of it. Also, you don't want to like baby them and coddle them, because if some people know the truth and they choose to ignore it. So you it just depends on who you're talking to and what the topic is about. But I do like I agree with the whole leaving it positive and keeping it only on God, not on like scare tactics. Scare tactics.
No, I think that's on point. That's on point because I completely agree that we as apostolics tend to kind of do that a lot, not only with other people, but even with people in our own congregation. And I completely agree with that. But yeah, that's really good. That's really good, and that's kind of like sort of what I wanted my answer to be, because I knew that he hadn't been in church in a while, and that's something that I didn't want to say. Was like, oh yeah, God's trying to, you know, like I heard people say things like that, like, oh yeah, like the tsunami happened because he's wiping out all these people because of the sin that they had, or the wildfires that were here in Northern California. Oh, God's cleaning out the land of the wicked. That's what I heard one preacher say one time, and I was like, really? Like, man. But yeah, if I want to see if my brother Tim wants to say anything. If you don't, type in the chat no.
Andrew, I don't know if he is connected or not. He is up there in the room.
Oh, okay. All right, so you're using his phone though.
Yeah, he's using the phone. I'm using the computer.
Oh, okay, all right, all right.
Yeah,
Oh,
we don't know
yeah,
if he's connected or not.
on the computer it shows up as Tim. So I
Yeah,
thought,
because his name is there, but I'm the one listening.
oh, okay, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. But yeah, my answer, I actually had to write it down so I wouldn't stumble a lot. But yeah, my answer that I had given to my friend was the first thing that I told him. I said, that's a really difficult question to answer, and honestly, it is, and that's something that shouldn't be taken lightly with anybody that asks a question like that. Out of everything that I've researched, despite of all the evidence that I needed and all these things, all like these really deep philosophical questions that we have, this was probably one of the most that I've researched into was about suffering and why do we suffer. So the first thing I said, I said that's a really difficult question to answer. I don't know the mind of God, but I don't think that he's punishing us for something. So I agree with what you guys had said. I also told him that we live in a broken, sinful world that is full of suffering, but it is suffering by nature. Things happen. We may not know why God allows certain things to happen and not to happen, but through this pandemic, I look at it as an opportunity. When everything is going right in life, I asked him, "Do you really search for God?" When everything's going perfect and you have no problems in your life, do you search for him? And he looked at me, he was like, well, no, not really. And I said, yeah, and same thing with everybody else. I said, even for Christians, when everything's going right in our lives, our prayer life might, go down. We don't pray as much. We don't communicate with God as much. Not very many people do. But when is it when people do search for God? When we search for, and when do we ask for, when people ask us to pray for them, when is it when people are searching for, a higher power, that people would say. And it's when they are suffering, whether it be through the pandemic, through sickness, or through death of a friend or family member. I quoted him a quote from author C.S. Lewis. And C.S. Lewis, he once wrote, God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pain. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. This pandemic is an opportunity for a deaf world to come to know Jesus and to be saved through him. I also told him that we are also in such a technically advanced civilization now that this, I think, would be the perfect time for us to spread the gospel like wildfire in a world searching for answers. Churches all over the world took online services and spread the good news for the world to see, and it's almost impossible for to find a church that hasn't put their services online and is readily available for anyone to view. So this pandemic, it isn't punishment from God, but it's an opportunity to come to him, to have a relationship with him, and to be saved through the blood of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So that was my response to him. um, but after I had said that, I was like, you know what, I wish that I could have maybe said a little bit more. I could have given him a couple examples, or things that I had thought of or heard of. And basically what this question comes down to, if is where is God in a coronavirus world? The whole question really boils down to why suffering. And this is why I wanted to title the lesson while, or this meeting, why suffering. Because when you really look into the questions that people really want to know, is kind of like, like, why me, or why suffering at all? If there really is a God that is all powerful, then why doesn't he stop all the bad stuff from happening? If God is all loving, then why doesn't he get rid of all the evil that's in the world? But we live in a culture that maximizes pleasure and minimizes pain. Suffering is an issue that no one really wants to talk about, and especially in our own church, it's not something that we will make. We will come out with preachings back to back of. Especially if you go, say you go to convention, nobody wants to hear anything about like suffering or anything like that. You hear a guest preacher that comes down and talks at your church. They're not going to be talking about suffering, even in our own church. I mean, nobody really wants to talk about it, because everybody really I think that everybody just really just wants to talk about the goodness of God, and which, it's true that we should, but I don't think that we should also shy away from not talking about suffering, if you know what I mean. There is one apologist that I had heard recently that I am going to be taking this next bit from, that he spoke really well of on suffering. And, through this, he asked a bunch of questions that were along those same lines. And it reminded me a lot of what I was thinking about and what I was talking about with my coworker. And especially one of the ones that hit me, I guess the hardest is what a lot of people would ask is, why is this happening? Is it because God is punishing us? And it's a question that, even me and my wife had asked at one point: is God punishing us for what has happened? And you know what? And I know that we're not the only ones that have asked this. I know other people that have asked it, because I've known other people that, this was said to, also including us, and it's a when you really look at it, it's a difficult question. And I know that at certain points God does do it to punish certain people, because I mean, it does happen in the Bible, but I don't think that it comes very often. I think that when you really look at it, when you really evaluate it and you look at it, I think that we live in a world that is, it has to have suffering. It has to have suffering in the world that we live in, because that's just the way that it is. It's a question. It's an answer that I really don't have. It's only how to deal with it. Is really all that I kind of like brought myself to, is through asking this question. I don't know why God, allows certain things to happen in each one of our lives, but because, through Jesus we are able to handle it differently than everybody else. And yeah, this next part I have is that I've taken some of it from this apologist. I don't remember his name, but I also added my own bits and parts that are in it too, and it's a really well thought out answer, and gives a few examples that he gave through suffering. And one of the examples was like in John 9:2, as Jesus and the disciples, they passed a blind man. They asked Jesus, who sinned for him to deserve this, this man or his parents? And neither did anything for him to deserve this. In this case, suffering happened for quite some time, but this allowed for the opportunity of the works of God to be displayed in his life. In the midst of suffering, it's an opportunity for God to bring glory and goodness to this man's life, and for those around him to witness it. We don't really have answers to why we suffer, but we also don't know why God steps into certain situations but doesn't in others. One of the biggest ones that goes over suffering is the book of Job. In the book of Job, this dilemma demonstrates in Job's life. Job is a relatively good person that loves God and loves people as much as he can. But despite all of this, everything in his life is stripped away from him. His family, his home, his health, everything is stripped away from him. And at one point, his wife even tells him, none of this has worked out for you, Job. So why don't you just curse God and die? Job, he begins to question God. Where are you in all this? And his friends end up showing up, and they lean into this idea that Job must be getting what he deserves. And they ask him, what did you deserve? Or what did you do to deserve all this? And he examines his own life. and he can't see it, and he comes up saying, I don't know why this is happening. I don't think I deserve it, but I think I think that this is unjust and unfair to why I am suffering, and I want to know why God has allowed this to happen, and I want answers. And when God shows up at the end, his answer is not to tell Job why he is suffering. Instead, he asks Job 64 huge questions, all of which Job cannot even answer. This is done to leave Job feeling like a student, to make him feel, really small. And this is showing us that things do not operate according to how we think that they do. That God is so much bigger than us. He only knows every moment of every atom and cause and effect relationship in our universe. He can also see down the passageway of time and see how everything works out in his perfect way, even when we may not seem to think that it is perfect. But we are not in a position to know all of God's reasons, or how God governs the universe, or why God lets everything happen the way that it does. But this is why God allows us to lament. He allows us to give voice to our confusion, to our disappointments, and to cry out and ask God, where are you in all this? It's okay to question God. Through these questions and through these hardships is when we find God. It is through the Gospels in the Bible that we find the good news, that we are not to go through all this alone. Jesus has come to redeem all of mankind by his blood. He knows very well what suffering is. And remember, when we went through our last semester, we went over the crucifixion, and we talk about how Jesus was beaten by the Pharisees. Then he was flogged and whipped with sharp pieces of bone and metal that were attached to the end of the whips, and it tore flesh and muscles across his back and torn from his body. Then he was crowned with thorns that were inches in length, that caused immense pain when it was shoved into his skull and shoved into his temples. Then he was hammered to a cross where ligaments and nerves were severed in his hands and feet, and where the nails went through. He knows what it's like to suffer in our world, and yet he took it willingly for you and me. And our reward in heaven for all of eternity, it eclipses all of the suffering here on earth. But that does not mean that our suffering is meaningless. It is through our suffering where we strengthen ourselves, uplift ourselves, develop ourselves to be better and more mature people. When Jesus resurrected from the grave, he appeared to his disciples with scars in his hands. And as he showed them his scarred hands, he told the disciples, as the Father has sent me, I also send you. As a wounded savior, a suffering savior who has scars in his hands, it's through those scars that I am now sending you into the world. And he is inviting us through our own scars, our hurt, our pain, and our suffering to minister to the world. And I thought that was a really, really great answer. And I was like, man, that's what I wish that I would have came up with, like, on the spot to tell my friend. But yeah, this is pretty much the last that I have of what I had to talk about, unless you guys really want to dig deep into it, or you guys want to say anything more. I'm leaving it open. But yeah, if you guys don't have anything more, I mean, I just wanted to get your guys's input on anything else that you guys would want to discuss over in this class. If you guys wanted to go into this topic more in depth, we can still go more into this topic. We can go into any other topics that we any of you guys have other questions too.
So Andrew, in the end, after you told your friend the answer, how did you see him? What was his response? What was his, reaction to his question? How did you see him after you gave him your answer?
When after I gave him my answer, he was he had kind of like a, I don't know, his look was like, he goes, oh yeah, I've never thought about that before, or yeah, that's an interesting way to look at things. And he seemed interested. So when he seemed interested, that's when I was like, I went and put up a bunch of videos up on YouTube if you want to look more into it. I know that this is a really hard question to answer, but I think a lot of it also comes down to when you ask about why God, why suffering. It also comes down to is there even a God? If suffering exists in this world and God is all powerful and all loving, then he either doesn't care to do anything about it, or there is no God at all. And I've heard, or I've seen a lot of people go down that path, and this is why I suggested him looking at my videos of going through the different things that I had went through, which was proving the existence of God, and then the historicity of Jesus, and going through the Bible and all this stuff. So yeah, it was just a way for me to kind of like I guess just share the gospel with them. I guess more than what I would have normally. But yeah, he I haven't heard anything back if he's looked at the videos or anything like that. But I also don't work with him very often. But yeah, that was the interaction. That was pretty much the whole interaction that I had with him.
Well, at least you left him, like you said, he was like, never thought about that before. So, you did your part, and now it's on him to see if he's really gonna move forward one way or not. I mean, I think you answered it in a way that it kind of made him think if he was, familiar, but as you said that he was. I think God uses us for those things too. In someone that, we may not see all the time, or someone we've have work wise, whether they be friends or just acquaintances, pass by, because, those God's using us in their life, unbeknownst to us, to, put little thoughts, plant little seeds of this and that, because then later on, when comes, it's like, but I put so and so to have you think. And so, you know what I mean? Because sometimes we come across people that we don't even realize, and then later we're like, oh, what that person said, or this and that, depending on where we're at in our life. Because I also agree with you when you said, if everything was going wonderful, when as humans we fail and we don't have time to pray, we don't have time for this. But when we're struggling, when everything seems to be going the opposite, when we're having the rough and troubled times, that's when we do start looking or seeking. So as being human, and of course the world that we live in, I think we do need that too, because if we don't, then we wouldn't look for him or know what he could do. Like I had shared with you my experience, and I would have never known everything that I know now, as far as God and how much he loves me and how he was always there, even when I didn't acknowledge it or realize or even want him there, which I feel a lot of, regret for. So I totally agree with you on that as well. So and of course we live in this world, so it's not going to be, wonderful and roses because the ruler of this earth is the devil. So of course there has to be that conflict, right? Of the light and the dark and the good and the evil. And, you know, his prize is to have one of us as a trophy.
Right, right,
To hurt the Lord, because that's what he wants. He
right.
really wants to
And
stick
he,
it to him, you
yeah,
know?
and you know, one thing that I had completely forgot to mention, you know, and that reminds me too that I also did mention something along those lines, like telling them, you know, when we do live in a sinful world, and that also doesn't mean that I believe in, you know, um, the devil too. I mean, just as much as I do in God. You know, God can do all this, but so can the devil. I mean, the devil works in ways that go against, you know, sometimes against the laws of nature, and does things to people that, you know, ruins people's lives, where people go through addictions and people go through, you know, like crazy sort of stuff. You know, some of it is because we do live in a world that we have free will, which can be a gift and a curse at the same time. But of course, you know, as a Christian, I believe it's a blessing. I believe it's a gift. But to a lot of other people, it can be a curse. Because, I mean, you know, when the devil presents it a certain way, you know, that's where our bad decisions, you know, take hold, our bad thoughts take hold. And we end up going down a really long and dark path. So I told him, you know, I do believe in, you know, a lot of that stuff. Um, that he and that also became a whole another topic that we ended up talking about. Like, oh yeah, like so, like, do you believe in like ghosts and stuff? And do you believe like, you know, like witchcraft and all this sort of stuff? And we were going back with like stories and crazy stuff that we've heard or you know, like things like that. But yeah, I mean, I mean, it's a lot of interesting things, especially when you talk to people that aren't part of our church. It's a lot of it's really interesting the way that people look at certain things, and I that's what I become super interested in, and this is why I wanted to study so much into all these different topics and all these things. I had to get so I felt like I was so unprepared to give anyone an answer if anybody were to ask me. Now I feel like I'm in a good place where I want to talk to more people. I've been feeling that God has been preparing me to talk to more people, maybe to evangelize to more people. I think that it's all been preparation for my life coming up to this point. Um, but yeah, great responses from everybody. Yeah, I really appreciate each and every one of you for coming on. Um, if I don't know if you guys want to keep going and or if you guys just want to call it a night. If you guys want to get more into it and really go into some deep thinking questions. But yeah, I mean, I I want to go over more questions that are like these. I mean, even though they're really hard to answer, and sometimes I don't worry about it, Naomi. It's fine. It's fine. Um, but yeah, if I mean, I sometimes I feel like I have a little bit more of a different view than everybody, and that's why I like to get other people's perspectives and views on things. You know, like one of the things that I was thinking of earlier was, you know, was suffering always a part of God's plan? And you know, that's something that I think that I might have a different view than some people would. I think mine's is probably more. I don't know. Maybe it's because of the way that I had studied. Um, I kind of tend to give more things like more of a face value, I guess. I kind of tend to think of things, I guess, more. I don't know. It's I guess like if you like really think about it, um, was suffering always a part of God's plan? Was there a time where there was never meant to be any suffering? Um, I guess with Adam and Eve, maybe it couldn't. I don't think that there could be a time where Adam and Eve. Well, of course, when I believe that sin had always come into the world at a certain point. Of course, when they ate the fruit. Um, but I think maybe before that, I want to say I would have said that yes, and that's something maybe I don't know if you guys really want to get into it, and you know, like deep dive into was suffering always a part of God's plan? Let me know if you guys want to or not. What makes me think that? What all right. What makes me think that suffering was always a part of God's plan was I think when I look at everything, when I think of the whole universe, this all goes back to the first part of that I talked about in my first session when I was talking about the whole beginning of the universe and you know proving God's existence. In order to prove God's existence, was I looked at a lot of you know cosmology, astrophysics, and things like that. And you know, it's something I've always been interested in. But really look deep diving into it, you know, I picked up a whole lot of knowledge into, you know, looking into all these things. And I guess it's a view that I've always held onto as being an old Earth creationist, unless you're a young Earth creationist. I mean, that's a whole nother topic or debate for another day. But I guess looking into old Earth creationists, I look at the whole universe as being, you know, billions of years old, which would be 13.8 billion years, and the whole world being what is it like 4.8 billion years. So you know, going through the whole cosmology of Big Bang Theory, in order for planets and you know solar systems and galaxies to be formed, there had to be the second law of thermodynamics, which is the law of decay. In the law of decay, we wouldn't have planets, we wouldn't have stars, we wouldn't have our Earth that we live in. We have to have the law of decay in order to have a world where human beings live in. Um, Through the law of decay, I mean, there was also like the dinosaurs that had lived before. When, you know, obviously, if I'm an old Earth creationist, when the dinosaurs have lived billions and or millions of years ago, which was way before humans, they obviously had to have died out sooner or later because we don't see them now. Um, so there had to be suffering in order to get to where we're at now. And I know that there's like a, you know, um, there's scientists that have, or anthropologists and scientists that have also found dinosaurs with cancerous tumors in their brains and things like that. And some people will say like, oh, like cancer's evil. Cancer didn't come till after Adam and Eve, after they ate the fruit. I'm like, no, well, we have evidence here that it was evident in the dinosaurs. So there had to be suffering even before the Garden of Eden was ever made. Um, there's an author that I have read. I have a few of his books, and they're really really good. Um, he talks about he talks about Genesis a lot, and Genesis was a really I had a lot of questions going into Genesis. Um, and he talks a lot about it. His name is Dr. Hugh Ross, and he's an astrophysicist and a cosmologist. And when he talks, I have two of his books, and one is called Improbable Planet, and another one called The Creator and the Cosmos. Both are really good books, and it talks a lot about how our universe came to be, and how our world came to be, and what had to happen, and everything that had to happen perfectly and timely and in line in order to have us here. And he talks a lot about the second law of thermodynamics to have happened, especially the law of decay. The law of decay had to have been evident in order to get to where we are now. And how the way that he says, that a lot of suffering had to happen, especially like where the dinosaurs and animals were before, in order to create all these fossil fuels that we have underneath us, in order to create a whole civilization, where to bring us to where we are now, to create such, I guess, like the maximum amount of civilization, to create a maximum amount of number of people that would need to be redeemed and saved. So that's the way that he kind of like looks at everything. Really interesting view, and I know it's something that I know a lot of people haven't heard of. Maybe a lot of people wouldn't agree with it. I don't know if people would agree with the way that I hold things. I did talk to Brother Mingle one time, and Brother Mingle, he's all into this apologetics type stuff. And he kind of changed my mind a bit on Adam and Eve, because I always thought, because of the law of decay, that Adam and Eve had to die out sooner or later. But he was talking to me about, they were the only people that were God breathed. They could have, lived forever. Maybe there wasn't suffering when they were there. But Dr. Hugh Ross, he also brings in, in Genesis, it also talks about how Adam and Eve, when God created the garden, Adam worked in the garden. He I guess kind of was like a farmer. Like, he had to work in order to take care of the garden, and in order to work, has to bring some type of pain. But I guess when sin came in, it intensified that pain. I guess when Adam and Eve had to work in the garden, it's a certain type of suffering. It's a certain type of pain. When you work, it's a good type of work. Like, oh man, like I feel it, I'm tired, but I worked. But after they ate the fruit and they were cast out of the garden, that pain and that work would have been intensified. So I thought that that's a really interesting. Yeah, and I know it says with labor pains. Yeah, exactly. It's a different type of view when you really look at it. I mean, these types of views and these types of conversations, this is my jam. This is what I'm really into. I mean, if you guys wanna, I don't know if you guys want to get into it or keep talking about it or anything like that. I mean, this is kind of where my brain goes, and I guess it's from being an engineer. This is how I look at things. I kind of look at things like I need like evidence. I need concrete facts. I need something that I can test, something that I can look at, and this is where a lot of cosmology and astrophysics really comes into play, and makes me super interested in it. But this is what I love. But because of it, to some people might think that it's a crutch, because it makes me hold different views than other people in church. But I don't think so. I mean, for me, it's increased my faith even more. But yeah, I don't know. What do you all think? I don't know if anybody wants to chime in and say anything.
That was very interesting. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
No, I said that was pretty interesting, because it's true. Like when I think of Adam and Eve, I just think of like God made everything already mature. Like the trees had apples, all the flowers were blooming. I never think of them like having to work, like being farmers and actually having to work the land and make it fruitful. Because I just picture Adam and Eve like living in the Garden of Eden, which everybody says was like heaven on earth,
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a good insight.
Yeah. And I think that's what a lot of people think is like, oh, it's just heaven on earth, and maybe the grapes from the vines came down by themselves, and they were just laying there and they were eating them out, and they didn't have to do anything. But I think that they had to do some level of work, because they're still human. They're still like us. So this is where I think that Dr. Hugh Ross may be right to a certain point. There are some things that he mentions that I'm not really too sure that I'm really all on board with. But most of a lot of what he talks about, it gives you a whole different perspective with things. And I know this is probably something that I haven't really talked about with my wife. So I'm kind of like coming off on a tangent here a little bit.
Well, I would agree that to some extent, like you said, it's still paradise and they still felt a little bit of pain, but I think when once sin was, introduced after they ate the fruit, then that's when it intensified. And that's when, if we still go down the line of how you look at things, you could see the pattern, because then after that, they were thrown out of the Garden of Eden. So that had to be harsh, right? From having everything provided to, oh crap, now we gotta we gotta figure it out. We
Right.
gotta provide, right? And then when she gave, birth, and what women go through with that, and then the first, to have a son killed, and at the same time the other son be a murderer. So the first crime, the first bloodshed, all of that. I mean, even though they were in paradise because they were the first ones, they also experienced everything to its intensity, which, now we have a lot of people, and not, we are touched by evil because people do bad things, or in our family, or how they say good things happen, bad things happen to good people, or whatever the case is, but they experienced it firsthand because they were the first ones, to of the human race, so I could see where it's going, and you could see the pattern of how it just gets worse and worse and intense and worse. So like you said, they could have lived forever, but also back in the way we read it's read in the Bible, people lived years, 800, 900 years. But now, I mean, we're lucky if we get to 60, 70.
All right.
And not right, because also I think the harshness and all that shortens, and would have to, can't, it's not the same as it was in the beginning, because everything, like you says, evolves and changes and gets worse. Than it's going to come to an end. That's what this whole thing is about, right? It's all going to come to a head, and that's where we need to know that we're trying to be on the right path, or like I'm one to say, I'm not one to say, I've heard brethren, and it is just like, okay, if you feel so sure about it, I've heard brethren say, oh, my mansion's gonna be like this, and I don't think that way. I'm like, you know what, I don't care if I'm homeless, if I have to sleep on the streets of gold. I want when the gate shuts, that it's on my behind, the gate is shutting, not in my face, and just as long as I'm there, I don't care if I'm the poorest with nothing. I just want to make it,
Exactly.
and to be able to be there.
Yep.
And yeah, and so when they boast like that, I'm like, wow, if you feel that sure, praise God. I don't. I humbly and respectfully just try to do my, because I know I am far from perfect and of everything, and so my aspect of that is very, very different. So I'm like, okay, I don't think that way. I'm just really trying to do my best, and I know I fall short, and I just ask God to help me. So that's what I see about the suffering, and I could kind of see your line of sight as you've explained it, and it just could see it. So I never seen it that way before, never put it in that perspective. So you kind of like put me in the line a little bit and say, no, over here, focus. So so that's good. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. No, I appreciate the feedback. Also, Naomi said that the Adam had to name all the animals and take care of the garden. So I agree. Yeah, that the pain was multiplied. Yep. So yeah, that's why I think maybe suffering always had to be. Of course, I gotta be wrong, but that's what I think. I think that suffering was always part of the plan. In order to have a universe to sustain a world like we have and to have the maximum amount of people that are here, to me that makes sense in my head. That makes sense though when I kind of read that and was explained like that. I was like, you know what, that really does makes a lot of sense to me, and of course that suffering would have to be in a world that constantly has tsunamis, earthquakes, volcano eruptions, um, ice ages, extinction events like that, and when meteors were hitting the earth and going out, making all these animals extinct, like 90%, over 90% of them out at sometimes. This is it has to happen. It has to happen. It's just kind of like the world that we live in. Um, but
So
me,
let
that's
me ask you, a question, kind of
yeah,
playing devil's advocate for a
yeah.
second. How you're saying extinction and stuff like that. Then does that also fall in the line when, God did the flood, and because he had regretted making man and
Mhm,
just wiped out everyone except for the ones who were on the boat? you,
mhm.
you know what I mean? Does that also fall with that? Because that was like harsh, so it's like,
Yeah,
wow, that was
yeah,
like, but he also gave time, right? I mean, the ark wasn't built like in 2 days. It was years and years of, you know, listen. And of course
right.
the animals, I feel the animals, even though they don't have a soul, you know what I mean? They're not aware, they're on instinct, but they know who their creator is. They know, because they have more sense than us as humans, I think sometimes, because
Right,
animals don't do a lot of things humans do to
right.
each other and their children or their unborn children, or things like that, horrific things that
Mhm.
I can't wrap my head around. But
Right,
they did, the 2 by 2 did obey and got on the ark,
right.
and then everyone else and everything else was just wiped out,
Hmm.
wiped out. So for you, all that is all part of the extinction process. Even touched humans, not just
Right,
the animals and nature, I guess,
right.
would be my question for you.
But I think in that case, it didn't fall through, um, anything natural. Of course, because I think it had to be God had to have done that. It says in the Bible that He was the one that did that. I think the all those extinction events that I was talking about before are just through naturalistic processes that go through an aging Earth, going through this solar system that we have. Things happen. In that case, I would say that it was God's judgment against those people, as so are other times that are happened in the Bible. So I think that it was a type of suffering that man brought to themselves. So in this world that we live in, I think that in order to have the type of world that we live in, um, when God has given us free will to do what we want, we also have to live with those consequences. And sometimes those consequences, I guess in the Bible, God's bring judgment. He brings judgment upon those consequences. But at first, I mean, when I had talked about it in the beginning, when I had read the Old Testament, that those were really hard places for me to look at. When I started studying about them more, it became more, I guess, more interesting or more, I guess, easier to look at it, because at first it was really hard for me to look at it. And I was like, man, like, really, God? do you really have to do that? Was it really that serious? But when you start studying about it and what they did is was God's judgment what's the word I'm looking for?
Appropriate?
Appropriate. Yes, appropriate. Thank you. So if was it appropriate for what had happened? And through that, like Noah's flood, I think it was appropriate. One of the other places I looked at was when the Israelites have gone out of Egypt, crossed the Dead Sea. I am and had went and camped out at Mount Sinai. And when Moses went up and he came back down, they're already worshiping other gods. And at first, God says, "You know what? I'm done with them. I'm going to kill them." And Moses says, "Wait. No, don't kill them. Let me talk to them first." And he goes and he talks to them. And then when he goes up, talks to them in their faces and see what they're doing, Moses just says, "You know what? Go for it. Kill them." And to me, it was one of the weirdest things that had happened. And I was like, what? Like, I don't understand. Like, why? I don't know. I was like, I think it's from when you look at it at a different perspective. I have talked about this with my wife before. And it's when you look at it at a perspective, I guess, when you come born and raised in church, everything's kind of watered down for you. That was one of the things that I had seen maybe like in the like TV shows or movies or kids shows or something like that. You just see like a little golden calf just sitting there and people are just dancing around it. And when you think about that, it's like, man, like, was it really that big of a deal, God? Like, couldn't you spent all this time and energy saving these people, and then when you do, you want to kill them? I'm like, it doesn't make sense. But when you really look into it and you study about it, what they were doing, I think, did deserve God's punishment. When they had built that calf, it was the god Molech. And when you look into Molech, what it really was, it wasn't just a really small golden calf or like an actual cow. It was this, human-like figure with the head of a cow and horns that are coming out, that was kind of just like sitting down with its hands like this, with at the bottom of it was open, where they would be able to put all the wood and all the fire in it. So when they would burn that wood, that whole calf would be glowing red hot. And with its hands that are out like this, these people would go and get babies and place them on the hands and burn them alive. When they would burn them alive, they would dance and they'd chant and they'd sing around it. And it kind of, when you have to put passages together, you kind of have to, I guess, investigate, and you can't just look at one part. So when you look at it in the book of Genesis, it tells you one part, but when you look in Hebrews, I don't remember what verse or what chapter it was, but it talks about it again. And it says when Moses came down from the mountain, he talks to Aaron and he says, "What is that noise? That is not the noise of praise. That is a noise of war." It's like a war cry. And this is what these people were doing, was that they were yelling and, like being so loud because they didn't want the people that were around them to know that they were burning all these babies alive and giving them as sacrifices to the god Molech. And so it's like things in that case where it's like, man, like, yeah, God, I think that he did do justice appropriately where it should have been. And I think it's things like that where I've heard that it was along that same lines where he cast judgment on the people during Noah's flood. And it's something that I haven't looked into as much as what the topic that I told you about at the Mount Sinai. But I know that they were along the same lines where they were doing a lot of human sacrifices. It was a lot of sin that they were in that they weren't regretful of. It was kind of just like a free for all where they kind of did whatever they wanted. They weren't. I guess it was just like a free fall for everybody. And I guess in that judgment, it was appropriate for what had happened. And it was a really good point about the animals that Hugh had brought up, and this is why I think that God also allows two of every kind of area of animals to come on the ark, is because animals aren't like humans. It says, that the birds, when they sing, they praise God, or like things like that. And but the animals don't have a level of conscience that we do. We have, I think, more of a conscience and free will than animals do. I don't think animals really have any sort of intellectual, conscience or anything. They may be able to feel pain and suffering like we do, but I don't think that they feel as much emotion. They might be able to feel some emotion, maybe of love or some form of pain. But I don't think as much as humans. I don't think that they have free will like we humans are able to intellectually think about. And this is why I think that there were a lot of animals that were saved to, continue the whole process, of, putting them out in the world instead of humans and only Noah and his family at that time. So I think that's kind of where I would look at it.
Yeah, because what they were doing was totally opposite of what the Lord represents. And he's like, really? So the way you said it, like, really, God, was that really? And then you look on the other side, he's like, oh yeah, because of what you said, that they were doing that. Just, I mean, human sacrifices. I mean, the Lord isn't about
Right.
that. So that's totally opposite of everything that he represents. And if they were his people, right, his chosen people, then yeah, he just was like, seriously? I mean, just the way you had said, he was saying the same thing. Seriously?
Yeah.
And just, yeah, because of that, then absolutely, it's totally justified and appropriate, because the only thing he could do is, smite them. That's the only thing he could do, because then that ends them, right? You take their life and it's a done deal, because he's God, and yeah, when God says hasta aquí, it's hasta aquí.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, that's a really good point that you had brought up with Noah. I mean, it's one of many questions that I had asked myself when I first started reading through the Bible, and I was like, was this really appropriate, God? Like, um, but yeah, it took a lot of, I guess, outward study more into the scriptures and looking up different things that started really putting things into perspective, and then starting to go through all the places where God really does punish all of the people in the Bible. Um, there's very few places where he actually does. And to me, I guess is when you read them, it's like really, heavy. And
Yeah.
I think that's why a lot of people bring them up, especially atheists. When they bring them up, that's the first thing that they bring up. But, what about when God committed genocide against the Canaanites? I mean, did he really?
Mhm.
I mean, I don't
Right.
consider it genocide if he created them to begin with.
Yeah. But
But
all that also started before us. It started in heaven, right? When the when Satan became Satan. I mean, it all started up there, right? Because God, for me, God doesn't want to force himself upon anyone. It's a
right.
choice. So even though he made the angels, he also allowed them to choose where their loyalties would lie, because he doesn't want anything or anyone, I think, by force.
Mm-hmm.
And then with us, that he gave us free will and then also died for us. I think the angels kind of look upon us sometimes, because they're the watchers in my mind, of everything good and bad that we do to, because accountability, right? When push comes to shove towards the end, that the verse in the Bible that says when, those of us, Lord forbid, that are going to go to hell, they're going to throw them with anger, because he's like, he created us. And, we love him and we serve him and we adore him because, we know who he is, and we're his faithful and loyal subjects. But for you, he created you like, in my mind, I'm thinking like a parent, and then came down from his glory to, robe himself in flesh and suffer, like we learned in the, last semester, how much he suffered physically to know what it's like to be human, to relate. So we could relate to him, rather not him relate to us, but we could relate to him. And as we're walking through this path, and to be like, he did all that for you, because he didn't do it for them. He did it for us.
Yep.
So that puts a more weight and more of a preciousness to just love God that much more. Because before I would think, well, he died for everyone. What makes me so special? Yeah, he died for all of us. But going through my life struggles, now it's like, yes, you died for everyone, but you're actually thinking of me way before I was even a thought in my parents' eye or anything. And you were thinking of me and everything I was going through, because you're the same yesterday, today, and forever.
Yeah.
And I just came along, I'm not going to say it, 19, whatever, that's when I came along. But you are already know everything about me way before I even knew about you, and really truly knew, the God you are to me and in my life. Yeah. It blows the mind, doesn't it? It blows the mind.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah, it does. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, this is kind of like where my mind goes. But this is what I love to talk about. But I hope that you guys enjoyed it so far. I want to do more questions like these. Think through these things a little bit more too. If you guys are okay with it, to bring up some different sort of opinions that we each have, that I have. I mean, sometimes I'm a little bit uneasy to kind of um, share the different opinions that I have, because I don't, of course, I don't have all the right answers. I don't know if they're right or wrong. It's kind of just where my mind goes. I don't want anybody here telling the pastor like, hey, no, this is what Andrew's saying. Maybe it's the wrong thing. But this is what I like talking about. And I think that I think that it's good that we each, dig through these things more than what we normally do. It allows us to answer these questions more meaningfully, and more intellectually, I think. And I love getting different people's opinions. Yeah, I love getting different people's perspectives and all that stuff. But I don't have something that's I have for the next class, but I am gonna start going through more material to see what else that I want to do through for the next class. So we do have a bit of time for the next one. The next one's gonna be March 30th at the end of the month. That's gonna be on a Tuesday. I'll do it at the same time. I think Tuesdays are a little bit better than Thursdays. Yeah, I want to thank you guys each for coming on, sharing each of you guys' opinions. I love the interaction here. This is what I love doing. So I know that I'm really gonna like doing this this whole class that we have, or this whole meeting that we're gonna be having for this semester. So yeah, I appreciate each and every one of you. Yeah, if you guys are free to log off, unless you guys have anything else to say. I mean, thank you guys for coming in, and we'll see you on the next one.